Neil Fischer, welcome back to Kicking the Seat. It's been too long, and we've got reason to celebrate. You know, when you go into a retail store before December and you've got all the Christmas decorations up and everything, it's kind of like, wait, have the holidays already started? I don't know how I feel about this. Well, the holidays are starting early here on Kicking the Seat because we're going to be talking about, yes, it's still November, but we are going to be discussing your latest book, Christmas movie ultimate trivia book, which might sound redundant the way I phrased it, but here it is. It's out in stores now, and you can pick this up, and I highly recommend that people do that. Not just because you're my friend and you wrote a book, but also because it's a hell of a book, and it's a lot more than just a trivia book. It's a full-fledged game, and you went deep on some of these movie cuts. We're going to talk about that, but we're also going to talk about the 30th anniversary of the Santa Claus, the
Mhm.
beloved Tim Allen Christmas classic, which is covered in the Christmas movie Ultimate Trivia book, and the floor. You were a contestant on a Fox game show that has a connection to the Santa Claus. So we're going to talk about all of that here today, and probably much more. But first of all, preamble aside, Neil, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. It's always fun to talk movies with you and to hang out. And like you said, it's been too long, and I'm just happy to be here.
Well, I'm happy to have you. So, we'll talk about the Santa Claus first because I sat down to watch it for the first time in years with my wife last night, and I didn't even realize it came out in '94. So this is the perfect for the 30th anniversary. It's a Tim Allen movie about a guy who's sort of a corporate middle manager who's recently divorced from his wife, and he's got a young son who is not exactly estranged from, but they don't have the closest relationship. And the wife has moved on to be with a psychiatrist named Neal. Different spelling, but played by Judge Reinhold. And one night, it's actually the night, Christmas Eve. Santa Claus is on the roof, Scott Calvin's roof. That's our Tim Allen character. Um, Scott goes out to investigate the noise on the roof. He startles Santa Claus. Santa Claus falls and dies. Yes, is the opening of a Disney movie. And there's a card that is on Santa's person containing the Santa Claus, which says basically if you put on this suit or if you try and take over the reindeer, you assume the mantle of Santa Claus until something happens to you. And wouldn't you know it, Scott Calvin puts on the suit. He ends up going with his son Charlie on a whirlwind worldwide tour, dropping off Christmas presents, and he essentially becomes Santa Claus over the course of the next year. It's not only a kind of a fantastical family comedy, it's also a pretty, um, I guess, meaty divorce dramedy. I had not picked up on all those elements the last time I watched it because it's been a long time. But watching it this time, I realized this is pretty heavy stuff for a wacky, high premise comedy. So tell me about how you first came to Santa Claus, and what do you think of the Santa Claus?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of when I first saw the Santa Claus. I had to have been maybe it might have been in theaters. I do remember, I do remember seeing Jurassic Park in '93, and I saw it maybe 3, 4 times in a row. I just remember the screen shaking and it being so loud. And I remember that, and I know that I was already going to the movie theater at that point, and I'm pretty sure I saw it in the movie theater. And this one, it's funny that this is the one that we're talking about because this is probably my favorite Christmas movie, and part of it is just because I love it. The other part of it is it's just become sort of a part of my own lore. Watch it every year, whether it's the 2 days before Christmas, maybe day before Christmas. It's just one that I return to all the time, and it's just like a Christmas comfort movie. I mean, I love Christmas movies, obviously, with the book, but this is just one of those that my wife and I watch all the time. We quote it sometimes, like when the holidays are coming up. Like, one of my favorite examples is, when Charlie goes like, "Plain milk is fine," or like, or just like, "Hey, oh, you burned the turkey too?" Yeah, with the hand or whatever. But yeah, no, it's just one of those movies that's become, part of my life, and it's hard to pick like a favorite movie in general. It's hard to pick a favorite Christmas movie, but if I had to, this would probably be my favorite, just because it's a comfort movie for me, and it's always a fun rewatch.
I mean, that's a bold proclamation. I'm not going to even try and disagree with you because people have their favorites. I love this movie too, even though I haven't watched it in a long time.
Yeah.
And thinking about it for this show for a very specific reason, which we'll get to in a bit, I was like, yeah, that'll be nice to come back to. And it's surprising how great this movie is. And I feel like it almost had something working against it because this is 1994. It's, Tim Allen is hot from, Home Improvement, and he has those Tim Allen Home Improvement isms in this movie, which I think thankfully kind of dropped later in his career a little bit.
Yeah.
The kind of the barking stuff, the macho man with the tools. I'm thinking specifically with the Thanksgiving turkey and the fire extinguisher,
Yep.
but he plays a real different kind of character here. I reminded sort of the Bill Murray character Frank Cross from Scrooged,
Hmm.
trying to put on this Christmas entertainment, but not really having a connection to it. Scott Calvin, we don't get a lot of him before he becomes Santa Claus. Like, we don't see what his married life was like. It's all in the context of the divorce, which I think was kind of a unique take. He's not a cold guy, but he's not really connected to people or the holiday. It just seems kind of like, yeah, the kid's complaining about something, or he wants to be, tucked into bed. He's asking me all these questions about the night before Christmas, and I just want to go to sleep because I'm depressed and overworked. Um, but by the end of it, there's a genuine, heartwarming moment where little Charlie teaches, through the course of the movie, his dad how to be a great dad and also a dad to all the children of the world. And it's an unapologetically Christmas loving movie. And I don't feel like we see a whole lot of that anymore.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like you said, Disney kind of snuck in a nice divorce story, something that was very real. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, one of the most heartbreaking scenes is like when they go to the lawyer and Scott is, has his beard and he's already in full Santa changing, and he loses the case, and then Charlie can't see him anymore because Charlie's like, I told him what happened. I told, I was honest. I told the lawyer, what happened and stuff, and then you just feel bad for him. And yeah, like you said, I think, the overwhelming message of this is a guy who all he cares about is selling toys to kids. He doesn't really want to deal with kids. They're a source of his income. His own kid he hardly sees, and when he does, like you said, he kind of gets annoyed with them, and he's trying but he's not doing a great job. And the fact that throughout the course of a, basically a 90-minute movie, his son teaches him like, hey, you're not only my dad, but now you're the dad of 6 billion people or whatever, the earth. And so I think it's really cool. And, it's a very surprising and touching performance from Tim Allen. It's not something you'd expect. I think you probably get that from him because it's like his first starring role. And as you said, you get those little moments of, hey, I'm still, Tim Allen from Home Improvement. Here's a little, here's me putting on the tool bell as a joke, or here's a little sound effect. But I think I think it was like the perfect storm because they catch him right in the beginning of his career. It's sort of an independent movie in a way. It's not a huge budget. They took a lot of risks and new technology, new CGI, and kind of partnering the puppetry with the CGI. And it wasn't like yes, it was a Disney movie, but it wasn't like a huge budget movie. And I think it was, yeah, like I said, there were like a perfect storm. And to answer sort of what you're saying, I think like a lot of Christmas movies now, it's almost more. I watch a lot of Great British Bake Off. I almost feel like it's a lot of when the judges say style over substance. So it's like we got the Christmas look right, we got like the North Pole right, we got these great actors, there's songs, there's dances, but there's the substance isn't there. And I feel like that's what these movies are missing now. It's kind of like that early '90s. Yeah, we're gonna hit you over the head a little bit with this sort of after school special, but you kind of miss it now. And I'd rather have that than have them like go for it rather than just kind of like gloss over it. And it's not about anything.
And it occurs to me now, like, this is kind of off topic, but what was it about the mid 90s and family comedies centered around divorce? I'm thinking of Mrs. Doubtfire, The
Yeah.
Santa Claus, Liar Liar. I mean, I'm sure there are dozens of others, but man, it was in the water. But I feel like this movie really treated it as a focal story point and took it seriously as to how it affected everybody in the family. Yeah, there's comedic elements to it, but you get the feeling these people are hurting, but they're trying to move on and build a reconstruct a new family dynamic for the sake of Charlie and also for themselves. You brought up that point with the judge and talk about Tim Allen giving an unexpectedly nuanced just expression, because when Charlie comes out of the courtroom, jumps up in his dad's arm and says, Dad, I told the judge everything about how you're Santa Claus. And you just see that look on his face. He's like, oh, Charlie,
Yeah.
you
Like you
know,
don't know what you just did. Like, yeah, yeah.
right. We're kind of sunk, but bless you. You are so, innocent, and you really believe in me. And that's a beautiful thing. Talking about the special effects. I mean, some of it is good old fashioned prosthetics, like because Scott Calvin, he has just under a year between Christmas Eve, the night he becomes Santa Claus, to Thanksgiving the following year, where he actually has to, take over the mantle. He's got to sort of become this character. He puts on a lot of weight, which we see in this funny kind of jiggly prosthetic belly. He can't shave his beard because it grows back instantly. His hair
Yep.
goes, white. And I love the final look of his transformation, because he's got the big flowing Santa beard, but also this kind of like a punk, punk Santa pompadour or something going on. It's really cool.
Yeah, when he's walking down the street and he's like, "Oh, nice, naughty," and then I think he says Veronica, naughty or nice, whatever, and she turns around like in your
Very
dreams.
nice.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
very nice. Yeah, in your dreams. Yeah, I love that, and I think it's one of the underrated things about this movie. As I said, it wasn't a huge budget. There's a lot of problem solving involved, and the reason I think it's my, and I'll say this, like, I'm not saying it's the best Christmas movie, but like you have your favorites, like we were talking about. It's just one of those that I keep coming back to, and it's just a comfort movie. And the reason I like it so much is when you have a Christmas movie, especially one that deals with Santa, everyone has their own, like, how am I going to spin this, right? Like, how am I going to, how am I going to Christopher Nolan this to make Batman a real character? Like, how am I going to make Santa believable? And I feel like this movie specifically does it the best, because I've always wondered, how's he getting into the chimneys? He's not going to fit in the chimneys. And the fact that, like, he makes the chimneys bigger, he shrinks down into anything, it'll create a fireplace if there isn't a fireplace. And to me, I was always like, oh, that's great. And then my second question was, if he has all the toys in the world, there's no way a sleigh can hold him. Well, nope. Actually, the bag, fills itself when the person needs the toy or whatever. And I was like, oh, that's genius too. And so, I don't know. I just really liked the lore of that. The fact that, they cast kids, which I thought was kind of fun, that were all like 1,000 years old. And, you have this cantankerous head elf. And, I don't know, just the world it created. And, I just love the scene where he meets Judy, and, she gives him the hot chocolate, and he's like very skeptical, and he's like, wow, that's good. That's really good. And then, she's like, oh, I've been perfecting it for 1,200 years or whatever. And, one of my favorite lines is when he says, what did she say? Sorry, I'm seeing someone in wrapping, when she
Yeah.
thinks he's hitting on her, which I think is hilarious. So yeah, I don't know. Just, I love the lore. I love the way that they set it up. And I think that's such a big deal when you have a Christmas movie that has Santa. It's like, what are we going to do? Are we going to copy anyone? Is it going to be traditional, modern? And this one, I just thought, I don't know. It just, as a kid, I was like, okay, yeah, I guess I believe that. I could see that happening. So
Talking about copying, it was something that occurred to me. I don't know if this was on the minds of the screenwriters or not, but did you ever see the Twilight Zone episode Night of the Meek?
oh, I know what you're talking about. I don't think I've ever actually watched it though.
Oh my goodness. Talking about it, this is a tradition in the Simmons household. It's I don't know if it's season two, but it's Art Carney plays basically a Skid Row wino who is also a department store Santa Claus, but he's so depressed over the holidays that he gets drunk and he gets fired, and he is walking down an alley one night, and a bag of garbage falls over, and then he turns around, he looks down, and all of a sudden the bag of garbage is turned into this burlap sack, and there's presents falling out of it. He picks it up and he starts going around Skid Row giving people whatever they want. And it's sort of like that idea in the Santa Claus, where the bag just kind of knows what the person who is about to receive a present wants. And when the bag is empty, that's, kind of it. You move on. There's also the idea of Neal, the psychiatrist. He talks about, he stopped believing in Santa Claus when he didn't get his Oscar Mayer wiener
Yeah,
whistle
yeah, right.
as a kid. And in Night of the Meek, there's a scene where the department store owner gets something that he had always wanted, and that kind of turns him into a believer. There's also that trope in an episode of Amazing Stories from the 80s,
Yes.
um, with Pat Hingle as a police chief who's chasing down Santa Claus. But what I like is in cases like that where I'm wondering, did they lift this? If they did, it's not an exact copy, but they're sort of evolving this idea to fit with the dynamic that the new thing they're trying to create. Because the Santa Claus does have its own rules, it's got its own lore, its own universe, and I think it's set up perfectly. I also don't think they needed sequels.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's funny. We watch all the sequels every year too, and
Whoa.
yeah, yeah. Because my wife, so my wife and I, we have like a Christmas watch list, and she is sort of a creature of habit in the best way, and she works special ed during the day, and she directs plays and musicals in the afternoons. And so when she comes home, she always, there's certain shows like Gilmore Girls or other ones that she'll watch to kind of decompress. And during the holidays, watch all the Santa Claus movies, watch Elf on Christmas Eve, watch Love Actually, and watch Home Alone. And there's so many movies that we watch. But I agree with you. I think the first one was so good, and I felt like, they're not terrible or anything like that. But I think that first one had such a charm to it. And speaking of the script, there are so many things, and I'm trying to remember them off the top of my head. I don't have them in front of me, but there were so many facts that I learned about this movie specifically, and all the movies in the book that didn't make the book. Like, I know the original script for Santa Claus, when it was bought by Disney, Scott Kelvin actually shoots Santa with a shotgun because he thinks it's
Oh,
a home intruder. So it was very dark. It was a much darker script, and then they kind of Disneyfied it and made it more of a family picture. So I thought when I read that, I was like, oh my God, like that's crazy. But that was the original script. That was the one that Tim Allen read, and he was like, oh, this is an interesting concept, but maybe we should, not make him shoot Santa Claus. So
well, there's a great scene where Charlie has bring her parents to school day, and brings his dad Scott and also Neil. They show up
yeah,
as they're trying to like make this co-parenting thing happen, which is kind of fun. And Scott loves getting in digs at Neil, and because he's kind of a square and he's a shrink and he doesn't quite take psychiatry seriously as a profession. But there's a kid, kind of a little a-hole kid who says, so wait, basically, all they have to do to become Santa Claus is to is to bump you off. And what I liked at the end of this film, and I'd never picked up on it till last night when I was revisiting it, um, the mom says, so when you grow up, Charlie, do you want to, become a psychiatrist? And he said, no, I think I want to go into the family business. It's a touching line, but I'm thinking, is there a dark future where little Charlie has to kill his dad?
Oh, that's kind of a fun thing. Like, I could see like the fourth movie where Santa is like really old, and he's like, please just do it, put me out of my misery or whatever. That's so funny. I that one scene actually when he's in the school, that's one of my favorite bits too. When they're with the principal, and I think the mom or maybe the principal says, what did you do with Charlie last night? And he's like, oh well, we went and got some women, drank some bourbon or whatever, drink some liquor. Just that funny Tim Allen sense of humor that really adds to it, because I feel like that's such a trope with a lot of these movies when you have the sentimental subject matter sort of as the overarching theme. You want to cast someone like a Bill Murray, like him, who has that winking, wisecracking attitude, and it kind of just, I don't know, lightens the mood. And Judge Reinhold is so good in his part as Neal. Actually, it's funny, my entire life, I was always not upset, but in my head, there's never really like a good Neal character in any movie that spells it my way. Like it's Neal from Heat, Robert De Niro, he's Neil. There's some other ones too, and I was always like, oh, Neal in the Santa Claus, he's kind of a dork, but he's a loving stepdad. And while I was doing research for this movie, I kept writing Neil because I was like, oh, he spells it differently than me, and thankfully he doesn't spell it like me. I rewatched the movie like a few different times, and on all the socks in the house, he spells it Neal, and all the Christmas decorations and everything. So it is Neal. They just never credited him correctly. So all the production design, everything is Neal. So now I'm like, okay, well, that's cool. And I made sure the book was Neal. So
When you said that, I've got my IMDb tab open. I flipped over like, holy shit, you're right.
yeah,
I
because it
just
always used to be
assumed.
Neal. Yeah.
Wow. That's really cool. I'm glad you got your Neil.
Yeah, right.
Um,
And you know what? He's not an action star. He's not like a superhero, but you know what? He's a caring stepdad and a good guy at heart. So it's like, that's fine with me. So
Well, I think that's also something that they kind of do a little differently here. Is we've seen this kind of character, like the new boyfriend, the new husband, and
Right.
he's always kind of got it in for, the hero of the film. In this case, he's genuinely concerned about Charlie and his well-being, and his dad's, seems to be losing his mind, but he doesn't turn heel. He doesn't go full, like, villain. He's always sympathetic. Yeah, he's kind of the butt of the jokes, especially with the the constant references to those. I'll call them, sorry for anyone out there who's upset by this. He's wearing Cosby sweaters throughout this entire movie.
Right. Right.
But yeah, it's really, yeah, it's really kind of sweet.
I
Um,
like that too. I think the heel turn is something that's such a huge trope, like you said, of the two lead characters. You want them to get together. What's wrong with the person the person's dating, or do they cheat on them? Are they embezzling money? Are they abusive emotionally? All that kind of stuff. And yeah, they didn't do that here. And it reminds me of a movie. It's actually a really kind of hidden gem Christmas movie that not a lot of people have seen. I don't think. It's called Holiday Affair with Janet Leigh and Robert Mitchum. Have you ever seen that one?
no.
So it's really good. I never had seen it. I watched it for this book, and I only got one question out of it. I don't even actually know if it's included because there's a few quizzes that weren't included here. But I was watching a bunch of classic Christmas movies I'd never seen before, and it's sort of like a romantic comedy. It's the first time I've ever seen. I think it might even be his only time. Robert Mitchum is playing like just a fun romantic comedy lead. He's not like a hard nosed guy. And the one thing I liked about that movie that Santa Claus reminds me of, Janet Leigh is dating this guy who loves her son because she had it from a previous marriage, and he's just like a decent guy, and it's like very rare, like you said, to have a plot where the lead character that is supposed to be with the other lead is competing with someone who's actually not a terrible person. They're just like a hardworking stand-up person, and they're just not right for each other. It reminds me of You've Got Mail too. That's one of the reasons I really love You've Got Mail is Greg Kinnear's character. Yes, maybe he's a little pretentious. Maybe he's a little full of himself, but he's not mean to Meg Ryan. He doesn't hurt their relationship, and they're just not right for each other. And they become friends at the end because they know at one point, like, you know what, I don't love you, but I like you as a friend, and that's what it's going to have to be, and that's just what it is. And sometimes that happens in real life.
And that's what I really respond to is when we get movies that accept that people just, sometimes it doesn't work out. There doesn't have to be a, this person is stamped as being a problem.
Right.
The last thing I'll say about the Santa Claus that really hit home for me last night is you would understand Scott Calvin's transformation from being the business executive to Santa Claus with just the regular stuff that happens with his family, but there is a callback that really sells the moment. Earlier on in the film, I think it's his first stop, maybe, or one of his early stops as Santa when he's still Scott Calvin. He's in his boxer shorts and his winter jacket, going down chimneys. There's a little girl that wakes up, she's on the couch, and they kind of have a bit of banter, and she's asking him questions, and he's just being sarcastic and grumpy, and she offers him milk, and he's like, I am lactose intolerant. I think that was even in the trailer. And he's such a mean bastard to her, but she's kind of like, oh, it's Santa, it's fine. He goes back to her house later as Santa Claus, and you can tell that he is a completely different person. There's no
Right.
hint of like that sarcasm or that meanness. He's just really gentle and really touched and really kind of proud of his new role. And it's just, yeah, again, the movie would not quite be the same without that little callback.
Yeah, and I think, there's that moment where he drinks the milk, he makes the face like, ugh, this is gross. And then she goes, you told me you were lactose intolerant. And instead of calling her out, he's like, you're right. I did say that. Which I think is because, yeah, you don't want to ruin her perception of you. And yeah, I love moments like that. I think the sort of the evolution of the relationship with his wife, it was kind of, contentious, obviously. And she kind of realized, okay, he's changed, and knew that Charlie needed, because the more Charlie's with him, the better he becomes. And I don't know, it's just like yeah, it's a nice thing. It's a great sort of co-parenting movie and it's a great high concept plot. It's like, what would happen if you had to co-parent, but the other co-parent is Santa Claus? It's like the insurmountable mountain there. But I think yeah, I love the plot. I think there's so many heartwarming, charming moments of it. Like I said, I think the lore, the way the North Pole works, is really fun, and just great performances, and especially David Krumholtz as Bernard. I think he's just so good, and like as a young, I forget how old he was when he did it, but just as a young kid-ish looking person, to have sort of like that wheeling and dealing elf, eating carrots, saying, "Oh, I love your sweater," all that kind of stuff. It's just really fun.
Yeah, Krumholtz is fascinating because, he was probably like 15, 16. I imagine he was a teenager in this because he did Life of Mikey with Michael J. Fox, I think, a few years earlier than this, and he was like really young now. And last year he's an Oppenheimer,
Yeah, right,
playing,
right. And
playing a
then
scientist, right?
Oppenheimer, and then 10 Things I Hate About You. At the end of the decade there, and the end of the '90s. So, really fascinating career with him. And then he had a great TV career, and he's a really interesting person. If you ever read some interviews with him, especially with 10 Things I Hate About You, just talking about, I think he said it was the one set he's been on in his entire life where like everyone got along, everyone had like an absolute summer camp blast during the filming, and then at that point in his life, him and everyone else just knew how good Heath Ledger was, and how sad they were when he passed away, because they're like, this guy is a consummate pro and really good at his job. And I know you don't hear that too often. Like obviously some sets are more fun than others, and you have some relationships, but to hear that like no, like everyone just had an absolute blast, it's really rare to see that, and the movie stood the test of time, so it makes sense.
Yeah, he was also the star of a movie that came out this year called Lousy Carter by Bob Byington. He plays this sort of this misanthropic college professor. So yeah, definitely seek that out. But all right, so I want to transition to Christmas movie ultimate trivia book.
Yeah.
What struck me was reading the introduction. It's a trivia book, and it has an introduction, and it's not just like, hey, here's some fun facts about movies, have fun. It's a very heartfelt explanation of why you wrote this book and how much Christmas, means to you, being sort of your favorite holiday, and talking about your traditions and things, and also why Christmas movies are important. And then that's followed up with sort of the rules of, if you want to experience the movie as a game, here's how you collect points, and here's the kind of the bonus stocking stuffers and things like that. So tell me about sitting down to write this book. You said that you did research for it. You watched a lot of movies. I think in some people's heads there are kind of like these almost like gag, gift books and things, like here's a bunch of fun facts that, kind of like joke books, like, oh, I just Googled a bunch of dad jokes and made a book about it.
Right.
Um, but it sounds like you really sunk your teeth into this one. Tell me about how the book came about and how you went about creating all of this trivia. I mean, look, I showed the cover, but I didn't show the spine. Look, this thing is dense. This is thick. There's a lot going on here.
Yeah, there's even some missing too, so it could even have been thicker. It's funny. I'm trying to think of different ways to answer some of the questions. So yeah, the first one was, I do a trivia podcast called Triviality, so I'm kind of ingrained in trivia, and at least in that world. And I had a meeting with someone at the publisher, and they're like, hey, we have these trivia books. Would you be interested in doing a Christmas one? I was like, oh yes, of course. I watch these movies every year, and um, when I was coming up with the idea, I knew I had to outline a certain number of chapters, and like how was I gonna split up the movies? Like what is it going to be by trope or overall theme with the movies? And so I kind of came up with that first. And I knew if I was going to make one of these books, like you said, a lot of these books are gift books, or people kind of maybe look them over, or it's one that you impulse buy in the aisle at the bookstore. And I said, you know what? If I would hope I have more maybe chances to write Christmas movie trivia books, but I want to include as many Christmas movies as I possibly can. Ones that people haven't heard of, ones that I like, ones that maybe will get new eyes, and just make sure that I kind of for lack of a better word, like involved everyone, because I feel like Christmas, whether you are Christian or not, like it's a holiday that's supposed to involve everyone. Everyone gets a gift, everyone gives gifts, and I was like, include foreign films, include films that are underseen, or include old films and things like that. And so that's kind of how I wanted to go about it. So it took me a while to outline it and like really pick and curate what movies were in it, which ones were my favorites, which ones I maybe had never seen. And sort of a funny story was I was actually contracted to do the rom-com ultimate trivia book, which is coming out soon. And I was contracted to do that one first. So I started outlining that book, outlined it, and the publisher said, hey, you know what? We'd actually really love a Christmas book. Can you do a Christmas one? And I actually had to jump onto this one And in about a month, I put a standing desk in the living room with my wife, and I watched every single movie front to back and wrote questions in real time to save time while we were watching the movies, and then kind of went back and edited them if I wanted to change them. And I did that for every movie pretty much. Yeah, pretty much every single movie except the ones I knew like really well, where I could write if it was just one question, I could do that. But yeah, it was so cool. Like going through all these movies that I thought I knew really well, or ones I'd never seen, like finding new things. And when you're writing trivia for something, it's weird too because I do a trivia podcast, so I'm like, I don't want to make it too hard, don't want to make it too easy. And when you're watching a movie, you're like, oh, would that be a good question? Would this be a good question? And I don't know, has you like analyze a film in a different way. So it's a very interesting process, and I hope I got enough movies for everyone reading it, that there'll be some surprises, some favorites, and some of these I wrote 15, 20, 30 questions for, and I can only include, I think it was only eight are in here because we had to save some space. But I ended up writing, I want to say, 20, 30,000 words more than we needed, which I was a little tired, but it turned out great though. So.
Was some of that leftover material? Is there a talk of like a sequel?
Yeah, I mean, I think if it does well, that would be really cool. I mean, there was like one chapter I left out that was like I called like modern streamers. I think it was like streaming all the way. So it's like newer movies that have been released in the last 5, 10 years. And I could definitely do another one. There's a lot of all the Jingle Bell bonuses are movies that I wanted to include, but maybe weren't popular enough to get a full quiz, so I could do those. And yeah, I think if it sells well enough, I'd gladly do another one. I kind of have it down to a science now. I know how to do these books. I feel really good about them, and it's just kind of, I don't know, it's just fun to like write trivia for these movies, and to know that maybe some people will have this on their coffee table and be playing with their family, during the holidays. That's like really cool. That's really what the most special part about it is, because my family is big, and the holidays are always a time of catching up, and there's a lot of great stuff going on. And my wife's family, her brother is obsessed with Tecmo Bowl, and so every year for Christmas when we go over there, he does a Tecmo Bowl tournament. Now, no one really wants to do it because he wins every year because he's really good at it. But everyone does it. Everyone loves, competing and having fun. And it's one of those things where it's like, that's a tradition. My family has its own traditions that I wrote in the book. And it'll be really cool if one day someone's like, oh yeah, we open that up every year and play along, which is cool. So I think that's all I'm hoping for.
Awesome. I got to ask, when you came up with these the quiz questions and the answers, was there a part of you, and I because you're going through this original exercise, you're putting the work of watching the movies and then writing the questions in real time. Did you ever like do a Google search to see, is this something that's a popular question? And if you did you have to go back and say, I got to challenge myself to make this a bit more unique or obscure or put a twist on it?
Yeah, I did it a few times with some of the bigger movies. I didn't want it to be like too generic, but it was a tough line to toe because, again, like I love giving clues and all the questions I write for the podcast, but I have to remember the people that I'm playing with and I'm giving questions to. A lot of the people that listen to our show are like really big fans of trivia, like trivia lovers. They play all the time, like once or twice a week. And our show is very accessible. It's for anyone. You don't necessarily have to be really good at trivia. Like I don't think I'm great at trivia. I'm like the movie guy, so like that's what I'm good at. But I think I wanted to make the questions, some of them maybe one gimme if like you really know the movie well. And my hope was that you could play this book by going through the questions, trying to get the answer just by reading the question. Like, do you remember this? Like, can you answer this question just from the text? And then I was like, okay, well, if you can't do that, can you answer it with the multiple choice? And then sort of the third one was just like, can you just look at this book, not watch the movie, and remember from memory? And I was trying to like toe that line of, maybe 3 questions. Yes, I could do it from memory. 3 questions, I didn't really have to think about it. And that was kind of what I was figuring out, was how to do that. So you could play it a few different ways. So it wouldn't necessarily just be, read and answer.
Cool. Some of the movies that didn't get included that I was looking through this, and I realized it's probably just because I'm sick, like in the head. Where's the holiday horror, Neal? Where's Silent Night, Deadly Night? where's Terrifier, if I might be so bold?
Yeah, I really wanted to include the horror section that's in there now, which off the top of my head, I believe it's Gremlins and Black Christmas. And I included suspense as well, so it was horror and suspense. So yeah, Black Christmas, Anna and the Apocalypse, which was a musical, Rare Exports, Krampus. So I was trying to include ones that I thought would get approved because it was a little bit of a task. Like some of them were I figured, okay, well, they said I can do a horror chapter, so that means the questions can be really graphic. And so I was kind of like getting pretty graphic with the questions, like when so and so gets their head chopped off, and this happens, like what who did it or whatever. But we had to like pull that back because this is a book that like families are going to read, and so I would have loved to have done Silent Night, Deadly Night, Terrifier, and like I love those movies, and if I could even do like a holiday horror book of all the different holidays, that would be really fun. But yeah, I had to like tone it down a little bit. And I have to remember that people like us who love those kind of things and all the gore and everything, like that's a very small minority sometimes to the greater public.
Yeah, and I guess like because the movies that you mentioned, like Gremlins, Krampus, I mean, I think Black Christmas is probably the darkest cut of
Right.
those, right? But even by today's standards, it's almost like it's practically PG-13. So yeah, there's no getting around Silent Night, Deadly Night, especially with the antlers scene.
Yeah.
But
Yes. Yeah.
my goodness. Um, but no, it's fascinating. I like that there is a mention of Silent Night from a couple of years ago, the Joel Kinnaman movie. I
Oh
I
yeah.
thought I thought I was the only one who really cared about that movie. Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, I try to include it, yeah, as many as I could, and it was a fun process. I think with Black Christmas, one of the things I learned that I had no idea about, to be honest, and I'd never that was one of those that was a blind spot for me. I hadn't seen it before. I knew the plot twists, and I knew just all the lore from it. The calls coming from inside the house, all that kind of stuff, and I didn't know that Bob Clark directed it, and I was like, man, this guy is so I don't know, just diverse in the way his projects are picked. I mean, he did Black Christmas and he did Porky's, and then he did a Christmas Story. So just kind of crazy that he did all three of those movies and different styles. Just fascinating.
Yeah. Excuse me. So I guess sorry, I gotta clear my throat here. E as far as, like, the ultimate movie, ultimate sorry, I'm gonna get this right. Christmas movie ultimate trivia book. I'm surprised it's not the ultimate Christmas movie trivia book. It's, the way it's written, I mean, the title is a little bit Borat-y, and if I might
Oh,
be
I
so
never thought
bold.
about it. I didn't pick the title, but yeah, Christmas movie, Ultimate Trivia. Yeah, you're right. It does sound like Borat. Yeah.
Um, but I mean, have you thought about doing, other holidays? Are there other holidays that you could do a trivia book about, or would they just be like a like a pamphlet, basically?
That's a good question. I mean, I emailed the publisher and I was like, I'd love to do a horror one, whether that's just straight, horror movie. But I think you could do it under the guise of Halloween, just all different horror genres. Cause I mean, that'd be so much fun to do, slashers and ghosts and found footage and creatures and all that stuff. And it's just endless possibilities with horror movies. That one would be really hard actually to pick which movies to include, but, other holidays, I mean, yeah, maybe New Year's could kind of have a little bit, but that would be tough. It might have to just be like, every other holiday trivia book or something. But I've pitched them like a horror movie one. I'd love to do an action movie one because there's so many good action movies. I'd love to do a Broadway one. And selfishly, I'm such a huge fan of Seinfeld. I'd love to do a straight Seinfeld trivia book like this, just every episode, maybe 5 questions an episode or something. That'd be really cool.
Well, I do like the idea of, from the makers of Christmas movie ultimate trivia book, it's the every other holiday ultimate trivia book.
Everything you could think of, right? Like even Festivus is in there.
Well, because and I feel like an idiot because I said, "Are there any other holidays you could make a movie trivia book about?" And immediately, of course, you pull out Halloween. I just don't think of that as a holiday. I probably should. I'm
No,
like,
I know what you mean. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
It's like I guess it's a manufactured holiday, right? I mean, you could do, my rom-com book, I guess could technically be a Valentine's Day one, right? So maybe that is sort of the holiday that one's under, but Uh, but I mean, you know what? If I can write books like this and watch movies or watch TV shows and create questions for people where I get to enjoy the content as well, I'll just tell me whatever to write. I'll write about whatever you want. So
That was a perfect segue, Neil, because speaking of television, as
yes.
I as I mentioned at the top of the show, you were on TV recently, on the floor, which has become, a staple in my household. We were watching it. We watched season one, and of course, we're watching season two. We're a little bit behind because we watch it every other Sunday whenever we have time. But yeah, you were on there, and your specialty category was world currencies. And when
Yes.
you first told me you were on the floor, and I think you told me what your category was, I didn't really have time to ask you, like, what the hell are you talking about? Or are you a secret international man of mystery that has, among your many other talents and interests, an obsession with, foreign money? But tell me about how you got involved in being on the floor.
So a listener of Triviality, who I'm friends with now, he reached out and he's like, "Hey, one of my friends was on this show. Not sure if you've heard of it. I think it'd be a lot of fun if you want to try out." And to preface this, I've never really tried out for game shows, especially since I started the podcast, which was almost 8 years ago, because I always thought, why would they cast me? I don't want it to seem like I'm some sort of ringer. And I don't want people thinking I'm like cheating by being on the show. So I never really auditioned, never thought I would get in. I've only auditioned for, two game shows in my life. One was Who Wants to Be a Millionaire movie edition when I was like 20, 22. And I passed everything. It was at Medieval Times. We did the auditions, got really, got far into the process, but they ended up not choosing me. So I got a magnet for my troubles, that I have on the fridge. And then the other one was Family Feud, which was a wild experience because my family isn't it. So we're very loud, animated every holiday and things like that. But when you're put into a conference room and told like never stop clapping and be excited for every answer, it's a very different type of manufactured like happiness and energy. And when we were doing it, we're like, this is insane. Like, there's no way we can do this. So those were the two I tried out for. Did the podcast. Never thought I'd try out for one, but I said, you know what, whatever. Let me try it. It might be kind of fun. Did the application. It was a very long application, and from my memory, I didn't even finish it because it was so long. And I was like, you know what, I'll come back to this. Like, I don't really have the time today. It's really involved. I'll see. Maybe I'll do it another day. And then flash forward, I forget what month it was exactly, but I got a text, and someone was like, "Hey, do you have a passport? Can you go to Ireland on the end of July?" And I thought it was a scam, obviously, and I kind of ignored it. And then someone's like, "Oh no, this is real. Like, can you talk?" And I looked up the person. It was a casting person from a company in LA. Talked to them, had a really good interview, and they go, "You know what? I have a little bit of time now. Do you want to do the test?" Which was very similar to the show. Kind of checking out images and stuff. And I did the test, did all my interviews, and maybe a few weeks, month later, they told me, "Hey, you got the call. We need you." So it was a very quick process. I think I was more on the late end of it, but yeah, it was just because someone told me about it, and I thought maybe I'd give it a shot. So it kind of worked out.
So tell me about the location was kind of exotic because I figured this was, they just fly out to, Studio City or something, if that's still even a thing, just like California or whatever. But you didn't go to California for the floor.
No, no, they flew us to Ireland, which was really cool. We stayed in this like really nice hotel, sort of like a classic. It almost kind of looked like, like a mansion or like maybe an old primary school, something you'd see in like a Batman movie or something. But really pretty hotel. And yeah, it was just really cool to take a little time, go to Ireland. We had a little time to kind of explore, and that's really, I think, what people might not think about when it comes to game shows like this. Like, yeah, you're competing for money, but like I never really I knew there was a chance maybe I could win, but it was never really on top of mind for me. And I thought it'd be a fun opportunity to say yes to something like this. But I think the real prize of it all is meeting people from all around the country, and becoming friends with them, 100 people. And we still have a text thread that it's daily, it's pinging with messages, ding 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 ding. And people are like, "Hey, I'm doing this. I got a new job. Like, I'm in New York, I'm in LA. Like, hey, if anyone wants to come get coffee, like come hang out. And then we'll see a picture 2 hours later of someone who met up with them. And just, yeah, getting a chance to meet really, really cool people, all different backgrounds, all different specialties. I met a great guy who's local here in Chicago. I met another contestant who was standing right behind me from Chicago. One of the contestants who was in front of me, game night, Andrew, he went to University of Iowa, which I did. And someone named Angie, who was story is based on a true story. She also went to Iowa. So it was kind of fun, like finding these little pockets of mutual interests. And that was really the fun part, was just like hanging out with people, meeting people you never would meet before. And now we have this network that seemingly will last for years. I mean, of a support system, really. And it's really cool.
That is really cool, and, for folks who haven't seen it, I mean, the premise is there's this giant floor. It's a grid of 100 squares, and on that square is a person, and each person has an area of trivia specialty, and 2 people go up at a time to the main stage with Rob Lowe as the MC, and usually it's images, sometimes there's, like, text involved, but, there's, like, 35 seconds on the clock or whatever, and you have to, go back and forth and guess the correct image on the screen. Let's just say there was a Star Wars one, so like one person says, "Oh, that's Han Solo," the other person says, "Oh, that's Jabba," and if they get stuck, the clock is still ticking. So it's whoever's left standing at the end, they win that piece of their competitor's piece of the floor. And as the floor space grows, there's prizes and time boosts and all this other stuff, and until there's one person standing. So it's fascinating stuff. But yeah, one of the questions that I have is, you mentioned you formed these relationships with people. Are you standing on this floor in this hot light up floor in this hot studio for hours on end? Do you get to sit? Are there potty breaks? Like, what's the deal there?
Yeah, I mean, we were on a studio lot, and I think it was actually a studio they filmed Braveheart, parts of Braveheart, and some other cool movies too, which was awesome. And a couple of the makeup artists that I got to work with, it was just great, kind of hearing them. Oh, I was on the Game of Thrones spinoff. Oh, I just worked on Gladiator 2, so that was kind of cool.
Wow.
And just all freelancers, because I'm a freelancer as well, and going from set to set or job to job. But yeah, we were on a studio. We would. Film all day, film multiple episodes, and yeah, we'd be standing pretty much the entire time. So it's almost like a test of strength, test of wills. You're on a different time zone. You're not really sleeping. You're excited. You're nervous. You're trying to strategize. You get a little bit of time to study, but not really. And so it's harder than I think people imagine, especially when you get up there and have to duel under all the lights and the sound effects and everything like that. It's not as easy as it seems, because like before I went, I watched the whole first season, and I kind of pretended I was in the duel, and I rarely lost a duel playing at home, because you don't have all those extra pressures. You haven't been standing, and feel bad that, oh, may I have to choose this person who I really like, and I got to know, so it's a different beast. And I think that's one thing, we all kind of in our chat group read comments sometimes on social media, and I think people forget that it's not as easy as it looks on TV. But I guess that's the phrase of the armchair quarterback, right, or the Monday morning quarterback who kind of talks about an NFL game or another sporting event when you're sitting on your couch and you have chips on your stomach or whatever.
Well, and that's one of the things I like about watching it is you do see the moments where people you think they're freezing, but they're not freezing. It's just they forget that it's their turn to guess.
Yeah.
And so like 15 seconds ticks by and no one's really giving them saying, "No, it's your turn," because that's part of the game. But you feel bad, and you can really feel that pressure of what you're talking about, being in that room with all those people. And Rob Lowe. How was Rob Lowe, by the way?
It's really cool, because my first book was Being Patrick Swayze, which we had talked about, and as a kid I watched Youngblood on repeat, and I was really excited to kind of interact with him. And there was a huge portion that was actually cut of us talking, which it happened to everyone, I think, especially early on in the show. It was 100 people, you can only keep so many things, but we had a great exchange where we talked about Christmas movies a little bit, and sort of how I got into my category. And I made a joke, called him Dean Youngblood, and got him to say literally to me, which was great. So that was cool. And, someone asked me, what does Rob Lowe look like? And I know this sounds like a non-answer, but I've met a lot of celebrities, and I've worked with a lot of celebrities and things like that. But the best way I can answer that question is he looks like Rob Lowe. And I know it sounds like a non-answer, but when you picture Rob Lowe, that's what he looks like. And I know it sounds weird, but hopefully that makes sense to you.
It does, but he's one of those guys that just seems to like he's kind of like a David Krumholtz. I mean, I know he's older than Krumholtz was,
Right.
but just had this long, varied, always interesting career.
Yeah.
Which I mean, I know he had kind of his scandals back in the '90s, and he had this kind of like a brat pack, reputation as being kind of a pretty boy, trying to be a dramatic actor or whatever in these movies. But he really does seem to have come into his own. So when I'm watching him on this game show, he's just so, delightful and fun and cool. It's not like a
Yeah.
cheesy actor like hosting a cheesy game show. He's cool. And that's why I'm wondering, was he like that, or is like, I cannot wait to get out of here.
No, he was very, very professional. He was a pro's pro. He's actually a producer on the show, so he takes it very seriously, and he cares about the program a lot. And it's really cool because I think we just saw news that Deadline said that this season is just breaking records for viewership and is doing really, really well. It's like the number one game show, and I think he's really proud of that. And you could tell when we were there that like he's there to make a really good show, perform really well. He's very witty. He has fun with the contestants, and it came through for sure. And I had a limited time with him, obviously, but I know sort of the consensus. Everyone just had a blast, kind of working with them, and it's a really cool concept that he was able to kind of birth, and I'm sure he's really proud of where it's at now.
Well, the reason that we're talking about the floor and the Santa Claus is because I thought this was one of the great plot twists I've seen in TV, and it's a game show. You had you went up in the holiday or Christmas movie category, and your competitor was Eric Lloyd, a name that folks who've been astute will notice came up earlier in this podcast because he played Charlie in the Santa Claus.
Yeah.
Did you know this when, like, because I know it's a big area. I can't remember where you guys were situated geographically on the floor, but did you know that he was among you, or was that a complete surprise to you too?
I didn't know initially that he was next to me. I once we got onto the floor, I kind of did my surveying the land or whatever. Kind of met people. Had some great people around us. That I've become friends with. But no, I didn't initially. I didn't know he was next to me. But kind of a funny little story. No one on the floor knew who he was, and one of my strongest suits, which isn't really like a talent. I mean, like I said, I've worked with celebrities. I've met a lot of celebrities, but for some reason, I just if you tell me who is this person, I can hit him right away. Like, oh, I know who that is, right? Or even if they have a beard or they have a hat or they're 50 pounds overweight, underweight, like I can tell you who someone is, from like 100 yards away. And when we were kind of hanging out, getting ready to film, early on, I was like, "Oh, that's Eric Lloyd," and in my head, because it's like I said, the Santa Claus is my favorite Christmas movie, and I didn't want to bug him, and I was like, "Oh, he's got a goatee, looks a little bit different. He's older, obviously, and he was just in the Disney Plus series of the Santa Claus as an older Charlie." And so, I just we were happened to be hanging out, became friendly, became friends. He's a great sound engineer in LA. He's working in the film industry. He kind of, gave up his acting for, except for a few little things here, and he's doing some great work in sound, and he's got a studio and all this cool stuff. And so we were bonding over that and like production and our experiences and things like that. And at one point, I just, I couldn't help myself because I was like in my head, I'm like, oh, you might be going home at some point. And I just said, hey, I enjoy your work. And he's like, what work are you talking about? He's like really sly about it because no one had said anything to him. And I was like, your acting work, especially the Santa Claus, it's my favorite Christmas movie. And he's like, oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that. It was a really fun movie. So just kind of a fun story. He's a great guy. We still text. We're thinking about working on some projects together. And like you said, how wild of a moment that I'm in Ireland. And not only do I meet someone from my favorite Christmas movie who put in a great performance and is a really cool guy, but I get chosen by the randomizer and I have no choice but to take him out. It was like the gif of Wesley Snipes with the gun and he's crying with the fedora. Like I felt terrible about it, and I knew if I went up against him, and I was like, I know he was in the Santa Claus, but I knew I was going to have to take him out, and I was going to take him out. No one was going to beat me in that category, and no one knew that I had written a book about holiday movies because that wasn't like no one was talking about it. So it was just kind of a unique, surreal moment, and I don't know, just one I won't forget. That's for sure.
And that's the thing, because I knew you had written a holiday book. And so when the randomizer chose you, I was like, how random is this thing? But that's the thing is you probably weren't privy to this, but and I'm sure you've seen the episodes you were on and all that, but there was the kind of the interstitial interviews with the contestants before they go up for the challenge, and Eric was talking about like, well, my category is Christmas movies, and I was actually in a Christmas movie, the Santa Claus. So, whoever challenges me better watch out. I'm like, oh no. So it's nice to hear that things went well, that you've made a new friend and possibly a future collaborator. Because I felt kind of bad at the end. I'm like, that I don't know if that how he feels about that.
Yeah, I felt bad too, but he's a great sport. He, like I said, like both of us have worked in production for a long time. I mean, him longer than me, obviously, and he knows how all this stuff works. It's a great opportunity, great chance to work, and it was just it's kind of surreal being on the floor. We would have these moments where you see in the show where like people are throwing one-liners or zingers, like during or before or after for routes or whatever. And he was cracking jokes to like some of his old movies, like when I think there was an animal one in the beginning with Josue, I think was in it, and like an ape came up or like a monkey came up, and I remember when it was over, he's like, I worked with the monkey once, and Dunstan checks in. And I was like, oh my god, he's like cracking jokes about his movies, which was great for me because I've seen all of them, so I knew what he was talking about. So yeah.
Nice. Now, when you went home,
Yeah.
um, I love that it came out that you really didn't know anything about world currencies. That was your big
Yeah,
bluff.
I still don't. I figured, get a false sense of security, and I had to make sure everyone there knew that I was an expert, so they wouldn't challenge me. And I knew if I got challenged, I was going to go home. Yeah, that was a fun moment. I'm glad I got that moment too. I was trying to once I got eliminated, I was like, you know what? Can I do a little swerve here and tell the truth? And I got that chance. Rob, thankfully, unknowingly threw me a layup and said, I really liked your strategy. And I'm like, well, about that strategy. So it worked out.
So my last question about the floor is, when you go home or you get dismissed from the stage, do you have to stand there for the next, 8, 10 hours, however long it takes to watch everybody else? And how does that feel? Or what's the situation like there?
Yeah, no, I mean, that'd be kind of fun actually to kind of stay and watch everything. But we go to an exit hotel, kind of far away from the production. So that way there's no spoilers. We don't want to give anything away. And even if you're an honest person like I am or someone else, like it's one of those things where if you're exposed to something and you don't even plan on being exposed to it, it's kind of in your head then, right? So makes sense. We, no kind of fraternizing with the players that are there. And so, yeah, we got to this exit hotel, and it ended up being like a really fun experience because you're in this small area, and then you just kind of see, this person got eliminated, and you're all bonding over this shared experience of not only getting eliminated, but being in Ireland, being on this big TV show, filming for days. And it was just, again, it was kind of a fun way to like debrief, decompress, and yeah, just a unique experience. And that was kind of fun. We all had food or drinks, and we're just my friend Andrew, who I said we ended up getting like Irish gas station Papa John's, which doesn't sound great, but when you're decompressing after like long filming days, you're like, I'll gas station Papa John's it is, whatever. We had fun. So
Well, and hopefully you had fun after you finished the gas station Papa John's, because that sounds like a nightmare, especially on the long flight home.
yeah, so
But
I think I was okay, but yeah, I was a little worried about that.
all right. Well, Neal, thanks for hanging out and talking about the Santa Claus, the Christmas movie Ultimate Trivia book, the floor. You've been a great sport, and I do appreciate it. But as I mentioned, everybody loves a sequel. So, you got a new book coming out that you've
Yep.
slyly referenced a couple of times here. It's not out yet. It's not on stands, but somehow magically, through the spirit of the holidays, I happen to have a copy of it.
Hmm.
This is called The Rom-Com Ultimate Trivia Book. Much better title. Comes out December 3rd. And we're going to talk about that along with a rom-com, probably a holiday-themed rom-com. I've got one in mind, and we may have already alluded to it here on the show. So soon, hopefully, you will join me back because I've already, implied that you're going to talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really excited for that book. If you liked the first book, the Christmas movie, Ultimate Trivia Book, I think you're gonna love this one. This one, I love rom-coms. I'm a huge fan of them. And if you hear this before the release date on December 3rd, I encourage everyone go to my social media. They're at Neal E. Fischer on Instagram. There's a website that the publisher gave out where you can sign up for some free giveaways, like signed book plates, a movie watching kit, stickers, things like that. And all you have to do is just say, "Hey, I bought the book. Here's a picture of my receipt," and they'll enter you to win some of that cool stuff. So just go to my social media and definitely, if you pre-order the book, enter the giveaway because it's something they're really excited about, and I'd love to have people sign up.
Awesome. Well, this will definitely be up before that book comes out. I'll leave the information down below so folks can go check that out. Definitely pre-order it. And yeah, join us back sometime soon for the follow-up episode to this show. In the meantime, Christmas movie Ultimate Trivia Book is available wherever you get your fine reading materials. And yeah, definitely check it out. And also, Neal is, you can find out all his information. It's Neal Fischer. Is it nealefischer.com or nealfischer.com? I can remember.
Yes, yeah,
Remember.
nealefischer.com. Yep.
That's right. And also the Triviality podcast. And what else you got in the works, man?
I have a new podcast I just started, a second one, if I, as if I had extra time, which I don't, but it's called Curated by Chance. A really good friend of mine, Lauren, she's an art historian based out of Rochester, New York. And her husband has worked with NASA, and he created an algorithm that gives us prompts like nouns and colors and words. And we have Chance give us these topics every week. And then we use it from my perspective, which is film, TV, Broadway, hers, which is art or maybe music, and we come up with curated topics to talk about, and then kind of share them with each other, and hopefully share it with the audience to check them out as well.
I need to listen to this. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of
Thanks for
course.
the
Yeah,
recommendation.
yeah,
All right. Yeah, everybody out there, go check that out. Again, I'll drop the information down below so you can do it right away. But Neal Fischer, thank you very much for hanging out, and we will talk soon.
yeah. Thank you so much for having me, and it's always a pleasure. I can't wait till next time.
All right. Merry, very early Christmas, Neal.
Merry, very, very early Christmas to you too.